Long ago in Korea, there was a young woman who married a widower, a man that had lost his wife. Now, this man already had one son, and he was already a teenager. And even though the woman loved her new husband, and she did her best to cook and care for the family, that oldest boy, he would never look her in the eye. When she'd put bowls of food in front of him, he'd knock them to the ground and stomp off. He'd yell after her, "You'll never be my mother!" No matter what the young woman said to that oldest son, it didn't matter. He would never treat her with the respect she thought she should have. But more importantly, she loved her husband, and she loved her new family. And to not have her son's love, well, that hurt most of all. And so, after weeks and weeks of trying to find some way to make peace with her oldest son, she took a trip into the jungle to the hut of a wizard. She said, "Wizard, I need your help. No matter what I do, what I say, how I act, my oldest son, he treats me like I'm not even there. He has no love for me, even though I am his stepmother. I need you to make me a potion that will help me find his love." The magician looked into his fire for a while and said, "Are you sure you really want to do this? Magic has its consequences." "Yes, I'm sure," said the woman. I need to find some way to earn his love, and everything I've done has gone wrong." "Well, I can make you the potion you need. But I need one very special ingredient, and only you can get it for me." What's that? I'll get whatever you want." And the wizard smiled and he said, "I need the whisker from a living tiger." A living tiger? To go up to a living tiger and snip off a whisker? It's impossible. I would be gobbled up for sure. "That's what I need. The whiskers from a dead tiger simply don't have any power. So if you want this potion, you must find a way to get a whisker from a tiger." The young woman thought and thought and thought as she walked home. Day after day she thought of what she could do. But still, no matter what she did or what she said, that boy wouldn't look her in the eye, wouldn't take food from her hand. So finally she decided, even though it seemed impossible, she would have to try. And so she thought and thought of what she could do. She went off to the marketplace and got a great big piece of meat, and went up into the mountains where she knew a tiger lived, and set that great big piece of meat down just 100 feet from the tiger's cave. And she walked down the trail another 50 feet to wait. It wasn't long before the tiger found that meat. He could smell that she had been there. But free food was free food. The next day she brought another large piece of meat and set it down 90 feet from the cave. And day after day she kept moving that meat closer and closer to the cave, until finally it was right outside the entrance. The tiger seemed to be sitting there each evening when she arrived. It would look at her, and then at the meat. She would back up and sit down at the edge of the woods, and the tiger would come and eat the meat. Weeks went by, till finally she began to move closer and closer after she set down the meat, until she was sitting right next to the meat, and the tiger still walked up, looked at her a little bit, and ate the meat. More weeks went by, and the tiger, as was eating the meat, looked at her, and she slowly stretched out her hand so he could sniff her hand, and she petted him on top of his head. A few days later, the tiger even took his head and set it on her lap, and she knew the time was right. The next day she brought a small pair of scissors. When the tiger set his head on her lap after eating that large piece of meat, she carefully took out the scissors and snipped off the whisker. The tiger didn't seem to mind. A little while later it raised up its head and walked back into its cave. The young woman ran down the mountain with her prize, and she handed it to the magician and said, "Now you can make me the potion." And the magician said, "How did you get this?" And she told him how she had brought meat and set it off at a distance and moved closer and closer each day for weeks. The magician looked at the whisker and dropped it into the fire. "What are you doing?" she said. You've destroyed the whisker. Now I must get another one for the potion." The magician slowly shook his head and he said, "No. Any woman that can make friends with a wild tiger can use those same skills to make friends with her stepson." And she thought about that for a moment. She thanked the wizard in turn and went home and set to work. Not exactly the same way she had made friends with the tiger. But she was patient, and the days went by and the weeks went by. She could set bowls of food on tables near her stepson and slowly move it closer and closer. She could sit a little ways away from him. And it wasn't long before he would take something from her hand. He would look her in the eyes. And she realized that patience had worked. Years later, she told her stepson this story, and he smiled. And he told that story to his children, and they told it to their children. Now I'm telling it to you. It's a hard lesson to learn. But if you need to do something that's impossible, take your time. Be patient. Just like the woman was. And that's the end of the story.